Chapter 7 of the Slipper Point Mystery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Slipper Point Mystery by Augusta Huiell Seaman. Chapter 7. The First Clue. It was a discouraged pair that rode home from Slipper Point that morning. Sally was depressed beyond words by their recent discovery, for she had counted many long months on her pirate theory and the ultimate unearthing of buried treasure. Doris, however, was not so much depressed as she was baffled by this curious turn of the morning's investigation. Thinking hard, she suddenly shipped her oars and turned about to face Sally with an exultant little exclamation. "Do you realize that we've made a very valuable find this morning, after all, Sally?" she cried. "Why, no, I don't. Everything's just spoiled," retorted Sally dubiously. "If it isn't pirates, it isn't anything that's worth anything, is it?" "I don't know yet how much it's worth," retorted Doris, "but I do know that we've unearthed enough to start us on a new hunt." "Well, what is it?" demanded Sally, still incredulous. "Can't you guess? The name of this vessel that the lumber came from, and the date. Whatever happened, that cave couldn't have been made before 1843, anyhow, and that isn't so terribly long ago. There might even be persons alive here today who could remember as far back as that date, if not further. And if this Anne Arundel was wrecked somewhere about here, perhaps there's someone who will remember that, and—" But here Sally interrupted her with an excited cry. "My grandfather! He surely would know. He was born in 1830, 'cause he's 87 now, and he ought to remember if there was a wreck on this beach when he was 13 years old or older. He remembers lots about wrecks. I'll ask him." Doris recalled the hardy old sea captain, Sally's grandfather, whom she had often seen sitting on Sally's own front porch or down at the landing. That he could remember many tales of wrecks and storms she did not doubt, and her spirits rose with Sally's. "But you must go about it carefully," she warned. "Don't let him know at first that you know much about the Anne Arundel, or he'll begin to suspect something and ask questions. I don't see quite how you are going to find out about it without asking him anyway." "You leave that to me," declared Sally. "Grandfather's great on spinning yarns when he gets going, and he grows so interested about it generally that he doesn't realize afterward whether he's told you a thing or you've asked him about it, 'cause he has so much to tell and gets so excited about it. Oh, I'll find out about the Anne Arundel, all right, if there's anything to find out." They parted that morning filled anew with the spirit of adventure and mystery, stopping no longer to consider the dashed hopes of the earlier day. "I probably shan't get a chance to talk to Grandfather alone before evening," said Sally in parting, "though I'm going to be around most of the afternoon where he is. But I'll surely talk to him tonight when he's smoking on our porch and Mother and Dad are away at the landing. Then I'll find out what he knows and let you know tomorrow morning." It was a breathless and excited Sally that rode up to the hotel at an early hour next day. "Did he say anything?" demanded Doris breathlessly, flying down to the sand to meet her. "Come in the boat," answered Sally, "and I'll tell you all about it. He certainly did say something." Doris clambered into the boat, and they headed as usual for Slipper Point. "Well?" queried Doris impatiently, when they were in midstream. "Grandfather was good and ready to talk wrecks with me last night," began Sally, "for there was no one else about to talk to. You know, the pavilion opened for dancing the first time this season, and everyone made a beeline for that. Grandfather never goes down to the landing at night, so he was left stranded for someone to talk to, and was right glad to have me. I began by asking him to tell me something about when he was a young man, and how things were around here then, and how he came to go to sea. It always pleases him to pieces to be asked to tell about those times, so he sailed in, and I didn't do a thing but sit and listen, though I've heard most of all that before. But after a while he got to talking about how he'd been shipwrecked, and along about there I saw how it would be easy to switch him off to the shipwrecks that happened around here. When I did that, he had plenty to tell me, and it was rather interesting, too. By and by I said, just quietly, as if I wasn't awfully interested, 'Grandfather, I've heard tell of a ship called the Anne Arundel that was wrecked about here once. Do you know anything of her?' And he said he just guessed he did. She came ashore one winter night along about 1850, in the worst storm they'd ever had on this coast. He was a young man of 20 then, and he helped to rescue some of the sailors and passengers. She was a 5-masted schooner, an English ship, and she just drove right up on the shore and went to pieces. They didn't get many of her crew off alive, as most of them had been swept overboard in the heavy seas. But listen to this. He said that the queer part of it all was that, though her hulk and wreckage lay on the beach for a couple of months or so, and nobody gave it any attention, suddenly, in 1 week, it all disappeared as clean as if another hurricane had hit in and carried it off. But this wasn't the case, because there had been fine weather for a long stretch. Everybody wondered and wondered what had become of the Anne Arundel, but nobody ever found out. It seemed particularly strange because no one, not even beachcombers, would be likely to carry off a whole wreck bodily like that. "And he never had a suspicion," cried Doris, "that someone had taken it to build that little cave up the river? How perfectly wonderful, Sally!" "No, but there's something about it that puzzles me a lot," replied Sally. "They took it to fix up that cave, sure enough. But do you realize, Doris, that it only took a small part of a big vessel like that to build the cave? What became of all the rest of it? Why was it all taken when so little of it was needed? What was it used for?" This was as much a puzzle to Doris as to Sally. "I'm sure I can't imagine," she replied. "But one thing's certain. We've got to find out who took it and why, if it takes all summer. By the way, I've got a new idea about why that cave was built. I believe it was for someone who wanted to hide away. A prisoner escaped from jail, for instance, or someone who was afraid of being put in prison because he'd done something wrong, or it was thought he had. How about that?" "Then what about the queer piece of writing we found?" demanded Sally. Doris had to admit she could not see where that entered into things. "Well," declared Sally at length, "I've got a brand new idea about it, too. It came from something else Grandfather was telling me last night. If it wasn't pirates, it was smugglers." "Mercy!" cried Doris. "What makes you think so?" "Because Grandfather was telling me of a lot of smugglers who worked a little farther down the coast. They used to run into one of the rivers with a small schooner they cruised in, and hide lots of stuff that they'd have to pay duty on if they brought it in the proper way. They hid it in an old deserted house near the shore, and after a while would sell what they had and bring in some more. By and by the government officers got after them and caught them all. It just set me to thinking that this might be another hiding place that was never discovered, and this bit of paper the secret plan to show where or how they hid the stuff. Perhaps they were all captured at some time and never got back here to find the rest of their things. I tell you, we may find some treasure yet, though it probably won't be like what the pirates would have hidden." Doris was decidedly fired by the new idea. "It sounds quite possible to me," she acknowledged. "And what we want to do now is to try and work out the meaning of that queer bit of paper." "Yes, and by the way, you said quite a while ago that you had an idea about that," Sally reminded her. "What was it?" "Oh, I don't know as it amounts to much," said Doris. "So many things have happened since that I've half forgotten about it. But if we're going up to Slipper Point, I can show you better when we get there. Do you know, Sally, I believe I'm just as much interested if that's a smuggler's cave as if it had been a pirate's. It's actually thrilling." And without further words, they bent their energies toward reaching their destination. End of chapter 7.